It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Welcome to Welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and the show is brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator. Also, to check out oppermanreport.com, and you can see our members section where you can subscribe, and there's a lot of extra content on there that is available only to members. It's not available on Friday nights or on Saturday nights on the free shows. Okay, today we have Dan Zupansky, and he's a podcaster. His podcast is called True Murder, and he's from Canada. It's some fascinating stuff, and he's the author of the book Trophy Kill, The Shall We Dance Murder. So, Dan, are you there?
Yes, I am, Ed. Thank you very much.
Hey, so Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm Canadian. And I wrote a book in 2010 as I sort of fell into a case which was the basis of Trophy Kill, The Shall We Dance Murder. I was a musician, and I was doing a radio program at the University of Manitoba. I'd been on that radio station for a few years. I was doing a similar format show in terms of an interview format show, 1 hour live on University of Manitoba, and I gravitated towards law and cases. I start becoming very, very fascinated and interested in, and involved with some major cases, and then I stumbled into an incredible journalistic opportunity, which was, again, turned into Trophy Kill. I became a star witness for the prosecution in that murder case. And then to back up that entire book project and the release of the book, I began the podcast, True Murder, The Most Shocking Killers in True Crime History, interviewing true crime authors about their books.
And we could find True Murder. It's on Blog Talk and iTunes and Stitcher and pretty much all over the place, right? Yeah,
there's all kinds of sites spreading the program around, so it's pretty easy to be able to find, for sure.
Now, is it ever live, or it's always pre-recorded?
It's always live. It's always live.
Okay.
And then it's just archived immediately after that.
And then when is it on?
It's on Wednesday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And like I say, on demand any time shortly after that, the program is archived.
Gotcha. Okay, now this story, Trophy Kill. Okay, good. Why don't we start with this? Describe the actual crime that took place.
Well, I'll tell you how you have to explain it this way, because This is a discovery, is that on July 2nd, 2003, around 9 a.m., a person named Sidney Teerhuis, who had recently lived in Winnipeg, was born and raised in Winnipeg, and had left for the West Coast, Vancouver, when he was about 20 years old, and had returned 33 years of age. And on July 2nd, he walked into what he thought was a police station, but actually it's a remand center, and said, I need to talk to somebody. And they said, what's it about? And he said, well, I need to talk to somebody. So a more senior official came out from the back, a guard came out from the back, said, what is it that I can help you about? And he said, well, I want to turn myself in. I think I killed somebody. And he said, listen, here's the telephone, call the police, because, this is not really the way you do things. And so he called the police came, picked him up, and he recounted his story, but right from the very beginning, there was something completely different about this person that was telling him these details, in that he was completely calm, cool, and collect, and nonchalant. And he said that he had met a man the day before, and that they had gone to his hotel room. It was very odd. He said that they went for consensual sex. Only a rapist uses that term, I think, when he describes the kind of sex that they were going to have. But he said they went back to the hotel room for a few drinks. They went out later in the afternoon, continued drinking, and around 6 p.m. on July 1st, they went back to the room, and he said he passed out at some point. And he said when he awoke, to his horror, when he went to the washroom, there was the victim, his acquaintance, new acquaintance, chopped up, as he said to the guard at the remand center, in 8 separate, in pieces in this bathtub. So the police, thinking, geez, this might be some kind of incredible prank, escorted him back to this dilapidated hotel, went upstairs to his hotel room, and found the victim, yes, chopped up in the bathtub, but what this killer had done, and he said he couldn't remember any of it, of course, that all of the victim's internal organs had been scooped out of the body and were nowhere to be found. He had also done other mutilation. He had removed one of the eyeballs. The other one was deflated. He had done some careful surgical, as they described at the trial, precision surgery, dissection on the body, a castration, a careful castration, a disarticulation of the elbows and the legs at the knees. He had been decapitated again, very much like a surgeon. The body was washed and posed and displayed for maximum shock value when that poor police officer came through, and something he'll never ever forget. So that was the initial crime. That's where we started. That's what I read in the newspapers. And shortly after, within, I think, 48 hours, he was smiling on the front page of the newspaper and willing to do interviews. So I knew that this is a very, very unique type of killer just right from the beginning.
How'd you track him down to get an interview with him?
What happened is that I knew a gentleman from my hometown of Thunder Bay, Ontario, about 500 miles away from Winnipeg, which is a much bigger center, about 750,000, about the 9th biggest city in Canada, and happened to be the murder capital of Canada. And he had moved to Winnipeg around the same time I had, and we had gone to high school together, so we bumped into each other a couple times. And anyway, he was incarcerated on some what ended up being charges that were dismissed. But when he was incarcerated, he needed a hand. I guess he had not that many friends in Winnipeg, so he gave me a call, and I listened to the nature of the crimes and thought, well, I can, we're not the closest of friends, but I'll help him out. And in a few months, just after Christmas, he gave me a call, and when we talked on the phone, he said, listen, guess who just walked into my jail range? And he told me who it was. Of course, I was familiar with the murder. And I asked him, I said, geez, ask him if he'd like to be interviewed. And sure enough, he was more than eager to talk.
Okay, great. So you had a friend there in the same jail with this guy.
The guy really did me a favor that I don't think I could have asked anyone else to do, or let's put it this way, no one else would have done. I asked him to share a cell with him.
Okay.
So he requested it, and it was granted. So he shared a cell with him for almost 2 months.
Okay. Now, is this guy Teerhuis? Teerhuis? How do you pronounce it?
Teerhuis.
Teerhuis. Now, is he like a big fella? Like a big, strong guy?
No, he's maybe he's about 5'6", maybe a little over 200 pounds, sort of a pudgy, effeminate guy. Really? Almost looked like he had dimples.
Now, if I were to talk to this guy, one of the first things I'd want to get into is, okay, if he said he was passed out drunk, he was so drunk, how was he able to accomplish all of this in a hotel room. You think, the people next door, it's thin walls in a hotel and stuff like that. So how did you initiate your relationship with this guy?
Well, all I did was ask if he wanted to be interviewed, and I had the radio program at that time, and we had arranged a three-way call with this go-between, because this go-between, like I say, his charges were dismissed. I had a house, he needed a place to stay, I rented him a room, so it worked out that way. I tried to facilitate a phone interview with this guy well before the preliminary, maybe 8 months after the actual murder. That didn't work out. So we start corresponding, because I had gotten this fantastic, interview.
Letter.
Just introduction. That was the word I was looking for. So I got this very, very good introduction from this person that thought maybe they owed me a favor, shared a jail cell with them. And to sweeten the pot, I got to say that I knew initially that this person was psychopathic, and right away thought that there was a fortune to be made in telling his story. And that is part of the story, but initially that's what the tone of our conversation was, all the incredible profit it was going to make from this book because of the story and the things he was going to be able to tell me. So I offered him, as per law, the Son of Sam law was initiated in American states many, many years ago, so that killers could not profit off the notoriety of their crime. Unbelievably, in the province, just like we have a state-to-state initiative, we'd have a province-to-province initiative to prevent this from happening, having legislation. Well, the province in 2003 was just drafting legislation, coincidentally. So I knew that it was going to pass, but at the current time, the law was that I could offer him a profit of the shares of this book, which later came back to, bite me severely, but I still did what I thought was best to get him on board and to convince him that I was very serious about his story, and I got to say, unapologetically, to feed into his psychopathic and, narcissistic tendencies.
Okay, sure. Listen, you start off, initially the conversation is he wants to negotiate for a deal. He wants a deal. Okay. Okay. Now, before you started talking about the deal, did you talk about the crime? And what was that first call like? Not call.
The first call was interesting. But really what he wanted to do was he wanted to first visit with me. So the first call was to basically give me the information that I would be able to fill out the form so I'll be able to go and visit him. So very, very early on, I went to visit him.
Okay.
And that is chronicled in the book. To me, again, he doesn't look very menacing, but I'm not surprised because I've read about all kinds of other people and seen their photos. You can't tell by looking at someone. And like I say, he's very friendly, effeminate. He's intelligent. He's actually probably charismatic, but he's definitely outgoing. And right from the very beginning, his ego had been stroked enough that he was imparting stuff to me that I thought, this is incredible progress. If this is the first visit, we've had a brief phone call. This person is really convinced that I'm a journalist of the proper stature to be able to confide in me. Now, I had no idea what he would confide in me about, but I just had a confidence that I could get past this nonsense that he was espousing, that he, did a careful autopsy on a human being, then traveled somewhere with pounds and pounds of internal organs and disposed of them because the police searched in a few mile radius around that hotel room to no avail. So basically, I thought that by stroking his ego, I thought I had done a sufficient job in him being able to trust me in order to tell me I had no idea what, but I was confident that I think I could get him to admit. I just knew this inherently, that he would admit that he could remember details. I thought that he would want to tell somebody exactly what he did.
Okay, a couple of questions. First of all, did he have a lawyer at this time?
Yes.
Wasn't the lawyer advising him not to talk to people?
Yes.
So how did we get around that?
Well, I think the lawyer advised him not to speak to the one true crime writer, author in the city. And that person didn't want to get involved in the trial whatsoever, so it worked out quite well. He did do some interviews at the other, more tabloid newspaper, but again, a combination of apathy, and sometimes they just change the author or the journalist on the story itself. A combination of things. He did those initial interviews where he was smiling for the cameras, and then he did another interview, and I guess he started with one lawyer, quickly got this lawyer named Greg Brodsky, he's dealt with more murder cases than any other lawyer in the English-speaking world, and why I know that is because that's what he brags about on his website and in interviews. So with that, his lawyer advised him not to speak to the media, but I guess I was under the radar going through this route, and Sidney Teerhuis really is an anti-authoritative, authority type person. So I guess I was the only person that somehow or other he wasn't mad at that point.
Now, was he planning on pleading guilty?
Well, here's a little Canadian legal primer for all you people, and this will shock you as much as the crime, I'm hoping, is that with this, you say, why would a guy say, I'm drunk and I can't remember? Well, because in Canada, I'm drunk and I can't remember drops murder to manslaughter, because it deals, unlike the U.S. system and other jurisdictions in the world, that voluntary intoxication means that you didn't have the intent to kill. So, unbelievably, to use that kind of language, that Sidney Teerhuis, because he was drunk, and we've all drank alcohol, so, I mean, we all can relate to being drunk, however, that this voluntary intoxication rendered him without the intent to kill. So the state or the prosecutor, Crown prosecutor, has to prove that he did have the intent to kill. So almost trying to prove that he wasn't drunk enough to do it, while the defense lawyer will be able to say that lots of people do things when they're drunk, but they're really not responsible because they didn't have the intent to kill. It's a mess, and it's almost ridiculous to anybody that looks at the law, but in Canadian law, somehow we think we've evolved past what the U.S. has done and how they handle the idea of intent to kill. And certainly there's that huge difference.
Yeah, I kind of like that better over there in Canada, because over here it wouldn't make a difference whatsoever. How drunk he was, or if he didn't remember doing it, none of that would really. And even if he was here in the States, even if you're clearly insane, they'll still convict you. And the insanity defense works here, like I think 1% of the time it's ever even used, and it's hardly ever used. Now, where did the organs go? Did he ever tell you that?
Yes, he did.
Okay.
It took me about 9 months or 10 months, because I asked him. He said, well, it's much too early to go into that. So he described where he took in bags all of the internal organs. In fact, every part of that, once he did decide to tell me, he gave me a quiz, a multiple choice. What do you think I did with them? Did I eat them? Did I use them in a satanic ritual? And so then the next letter, he gave me the answer and told me how sexually stimulated he was in the destruction or the disposing of those internal organs. He also describes in fantastic detail, again, this is the unique aspect of this book. I thought, America will love this book, regardless of not caring that it's from Canada and you have enough of your own sensational crimes and killers, that this guy, like I say, is really, really... Jeffrey Dahmer is his hero, and Gacy. So Gacy and Dahmer and Nielsen from England, which is like the Jeffrey Dahmer of the UK, and these were his heroes. And as such, did he learn something from those crimes? What was he influenced by in terms of Dahmer and Gacy? The ability to totally destroy a victim? So, you know, this is what I was dealing with, is that the letters that he wrote to me were not, "Hi, how you doing?" 9 months was, a lot of those letters were the history of his family, which I needed to write the book anyway. Certainly his adopted family, he was adopted into this family, were not going to cooperate with me whatsoever. And again, he's very, very articulate. So it really is a showcase for a better introduction, a more full examination of the psychopathic killer's mind. The narcissistic, the malignant narcissist. It's everything that you've read some snippets of, but it seems like there was no filter, no censor, no caution that this person had. He wanted this material to be released after he bamboozled the Canadian government at trial. However, I'm not going to break the law for this guy. It would have facilitated, it would have forced another trial anyway based on that evidence. I came forward once I had so much evidence and I was getting so much legal advice from top professionals to say, you have to come forward. Even if you didn't want to come forward, if you had some kind of journalistic, ethical duty to, I don't know. I didn't have that anyway. So I came forward and became the prosecution's, really, their one and only star witness.
When he was talking to you about Dahmer and Gacy and all that, did he ever mention the Black Dahlia?
No.
Really?
No,
Because she was dismembered, washed, and then posed.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I know. In my investigation, it was odd that he hadn't mentioned that, because that was very much similar to what he had done in terms of the posing. And he had described the victim and what he had posed and displayed for the police to find as a work of art, a trophy kill. So the Black Dahlia, I was surprised myself when I did the research that he did not mention that. Yeah, but he did mention the people that were able and were very much capable and did do a total disposing of their victims.
Now, with the organs, you said he got sexual gratification from the way he disposed of the organs. And how did he dispose of the organs?
He took them to a garbage can, a industrial garbage can. A BFI is the company, but it's an industrial garbage can by the Health Sciences Center in Winnipeg, which is a hospital. But he said that he rubbed himself as he disposed of the organs. When he was doing the dissection, he drank some alcohol, I believe it was whiskey or some alcohol, and he said he smoked crack and admired his handiwork. He sent me diagrams of, some of it's obviously fantasy, but he does send drawings to me that were the biggest evidence at the trial. Right from the very beginning of the trial, this material evidence was used to prosecute him. And without my participation, as the newspapers even reluctantly said, they wouldn't have much of a case. They would have to rely on his contention that he couldn't remember anything. And as a result, this incredible first-degree murder, when you look at the motivation, once he had, the thing that we were forgetting, and I apologize, what the police found in this murder horror spectacle was also not that many feet away, was Susan Sarandon's gold necklace. And Susan Sarandon's gold necklace was stolen from her trailer on the set of the movie Shall We Dance, Richard Gere, Jennifer Lopez, and Susan Sarandon. So she reported that to the police. The victim had stolen this jewelry, and that's how he met Sidney Teerhuis in a bar, apparently trying to sell the jewelry.
Oh, okay. I thought that Teerhuis had stolen it. Okay. It was the victim who stole it. Now, how did he get his hands on it?
Well, there was always a crowd around when you have movies, especially when you have some big stars like Lopez and Richard Gere. And it was the follow-up to the very successful Chicago. So it's not a heavyweight movie like that, but it had the same stars and it had that same kind of hype. So it was a pretty big movie. They were going to shoot it in Toronto, but they had the SARS crisis there, and so just for safety's sake, they had to move it somewhere else. And Winnipeg was the logical place because we have a pretty healthy film industry there. So there was a lot of people at an outdoor shoot near the legislative building, and I guess the victim came in from a remote reserve a few hundred miles away. He's familiar with Winnipeg, and I guess he just was walking around early in the morning and came upon this outdoor movie site. And like other people, they're just looking to see if they could get a glimpse of one of the stars. He wandered a little ways away, and I found this out through investigation. It's not in the book, but one of the security guards had fallen asleep. He walked into one of the, I guess, the nicest trailers, and they're quite nice-looking trailers. So he went in and found the jewelry, which is Susan Sarandon's personal jewelry. It is costume jewelry, but it's like $4,000, so it's her personal jewelry that she was wearing in the movie. I worked in movies as an extra. If that continuity is interrupted because you can't get that jewelry back, this is part of the reason why the story wasn't really huge, because initially this story reverberated everywhere in the world because of that jewelry. Apparently, first off, they reported it wrong and saying it was Jennifer Lopez's jewelry found in a pool of blood. Miramax didn't want that kind of publicity for this movie. The jewelry was taken. Sarandon wanted to have nothing to do with that jewelry. It was sent to New York City to a jeweler, I don't know, a costume jeweler, but he made a total replicate of that costume jewelry and sent it back so they wouldn't interrupt with continuity on this very, very expensive shoot, the Shall We Dance movie. I believe, and I don't have any evidence, and I wouldn't put it in a book, but Miramax would be smart to say, listen, let's just downplay this. And in a few weeks, they said, listen, the jewelry has nothing to do with the motive for the murder. Well, I don't play up on it completely because I'm chronicling the entire story, but really, it was the motivation for not only making this murder horror spectacle and making sure with the organ removal and the uniqueness that not even Jack the Ripper did something like this, that he would finally, and I say finally, get noticed for his abilities as this sort of forensic psychologist of evil.
You know, we're going to have to take a commercial break, but I'll tell you a really quick story that it's bugging the hell out of me, because we were talking about the Black Dahlia, and then how you mentioned that Richard Gere was in this movie, the Shall We Dance?
Right.
Have you ever seen the movie Pretty Woman? The last
Yes.
scene of the movie, right? The last scene of the movie, Richard Gere goes up that fire escape to that apartment where the girl's in there.
Okay.
Do you know whose apartment that is?
No.
In real life, that was Elizabeth Short's apartment, the Black Dahlia.
Wow.
They filmed that from her apartment window for whatever reason, you know. Anyway, so that just stuck out at me. So we're here with Dan Zupansky with one of the, I got chills listening to this story. Okay, Trophy Kill, the Shall We Dance murder about this guy Teerhuis, who's chopping people up in his hotel room, and then gets a hold of Dan here, and wants to become famous. I guess that's a pretty good synopsis, right? Okay.
Sure.
Oh, my God. Okay. We'll be right back after these messages with more of Dan Zupansky and his fascinating story. Incredible. This is your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. And if you're enjoying this show right now, there's more. You can get more. You can go to the Ed Opperman YouTube channel, and you could subscribe there. And we have archives of all of our past shows for over the past 3 years, about 200, 300 shows. You can also go to the Opperman Report Spreaker channel, and you could follow us there. Again, a ton of shows, about 300 shows on there. And whenever we do an impromptu show, an emergency-type broadcast that we do during the week occasionally, you'll get an email notifying you of breaking news and spontaneous broadcasts that we may do during the week. You can also go to oppermanreport.com and become a member. If you become a member, you help support the free archives on Spreaker and YouTube, and you help support the free shows on Friday evening and on Saturday evening. Each of these shows, Friday evening and Saturday evening, are carried for free on 7 internet stations, okay? So you help support that, but also, too, at OppermanReport.com in the members section, we have exclusive content. Shows that are recorded during the week that are only available to members. So please check out OppermanReport.com and help support the show.
The son of a Polish immigrant who grew up in a Brooklyn tenement, Bernie Sanders. He went to public schools, then college, where the work of his life began, fighting injustice and inequality, speaking truth to power. Bernie moved to Vermont, won election and praise as one of America's best mayors. In Congress, Bernie stood up for working families and for principle, opposing the Iraq War, supporting veterans. Now he's taking on Wall Street and a corrupt political system that holds up a rigged economy. Bernie's campaign is funded by over 1 million small contributions from people like you. He's fighting for living wages, equal pay, and tuition-free public colleges. Bernie Sanders.
People are sick and tired of establishment politics, and they want real change.
Bernie Sanders, husband, father, grandfather, an honest leader, building a movement with you to give us a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
Check out strawmanmusic.com. Sean Duff is our webmaster here at the Opperman Report, and he's a very talented musician. He's part of a band called Strawman. They're based up there in Canada. Don't hold that against them. These are like-minded folks. If you like the shows you hear on the Opperman Report, you'll like the music that they have over at strawmanmusic.com.
Enough is enough. Wall Street's greed and illegal behavior drove this country into the worst economic downturn since the 1930s. And then, after getting a huge taxpayer bailout because they were too big to fail, it turns out that 3 out of the 4 largest banks are bigger today than they were before we bailed them out. That's crazy. I'm Bernie Sanders. My plan: break up the big banks who are strangling our economy and make them pay their fair share of taxes. Then we can invest in the middle class, expand Social Security, and provide universal college education. I'll rein in Wall Street behavior so they can't crash our economy again. Will they like me? No. Will they begin to play by the rules if I'm president? You better believe it. I'm Bernie Sanders, Democratic candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
You know, you can get a copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator, if you go to my website, emailrevealer.com. Now, this is a limited edition book, okay? And you can get a signed copy of this book, and it'll be personally autographed to you or whoever you want to give the book to as a gift. Once you have my signature on that book, you can copy the signature and put it on checks and pass them all over the world. Emailrevealer.com. Get a copy of my book, How to Succeed as a Private Investigator.
He's fought injustice and inequality his whole life. Bernie Sanders. As a college student, he was arrested for challenging segregated housing. Bernie marched with Dr. King and thousands of others for civil rights. In Congress, Bernie stood up for working families on health care and jobs. Now he's taking on Wall Street banks and a corrupt political system that keeps in place a rigged economy. Bernie Sanders, a reformer who believes in ending racial profiling and mass incarceration so the justice system works for everyone. Bernie Sanders.
There is no president who will fight harder to end institutional racism and reform our broken criminal justice system.
Bernie Sanders, an honest leader building a movement with you to give us a future to believe in.
I'm Bernie Sanders, candidate for president, and I approve this message.
Paid for by Bernie 2016.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here with Dan Zupansky. He's a podcaster on Blog Talk Radio. His show's every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. EST, and it's called True Murder. You can also find it on iTunes and Stitcher and where else did I see it? Blog Talk. And I wrote this book, Trophy Kill, The Shall We Dance Murder. A story about Susan Sarandon's necklace gets stolen by this poor sap. Next thing you know, he's out drinking with this guy. He lures him into his hotel room, kills him, cuts him up. And Dan gets the story. Dan, how many times did you meet with this Teerhuis guy in person?
I just met with him twice, and then I corresponded with him for almost a full year of letters. He wrote vast majority of the letters, and then it was also telephone correspondence.
Now, and toward the end, did you ever tell him, hey, Sidney, I'm going to the DA with all this?
No. What I did is that I told him, it was about a year in, and the law had finally passed. And I said, hey, did you read in the paper about the law being passed? And he hung up on me.
That's the Son of Sam law.
Yeah, and he basically sent me a letter back and said, hey, listen, I never heard anything about that. I think you're just trying to rip me off. And I always knew you were a weasel, something to that effect. And he said, listen, everything I told you was just fiction. And believe it or not, his lawyer had the audacity to take this right to the end at trial. He said, listen, I just took the stories of Gacy, Dahmer, Nilsson, and Aileen Wuornos, and I combined them to give you a total fictional story that sounded true, which is very, very laughable. I mean, if anybody knows any of those stories and then reads 1 minute of his writings, you'll realize that he's not talking in general terms. They could not be compared. In the end, there's nothing to that nonsensical notion of combining 4 true serial killer stories to create a fictional story that unbelievably fits, one forensic piece by piece and solves this puzzle.
I tell you, when you think about, here's this guy, who was a horrific killer, man, doing this absurdly obscene activity in this hotel room. And then he's mad at you and he's calling you a weasel. I can just imagine being on the other end of the phone with this guy who just chopped up some poor innocent slob and he's calling me a weasel. Okay. Oh, my God. Yeah.
Very much like these guys, though, they have a hate-on for society in general. When you see the incomplete, disregard is an understatement. Of course, what he did to this human being, this defiling of a human being, I can say the creating of this murder horror spectacle, but then contacting the media and then smiling and what? He says, I'm not a monster. I'm not Jeffrey Dahmer. Meanwhile, he's smiling, mugging for the cameras. Then the atrocity that he sent me, 1 year of correspondence that ends up forever and ever in my book. And I don't think it's exploitive, this book. But it's forever and ever in the history books, what he said, the disregard, again, understatement, the way he talks about his human being, that he admitted he took the stand at trial, too, because he wanted to take the stand. and he trotted out a bunch of nonsense and denigrated everybody, even his own lawyer, the victim, the prosecutor, me, his adoptive parents. And so that's what it was, is that he has a hate-on for society to the point that he gave me clues as to what part of this was about as well. On July 2nd, when he came forward to the police with this, again, horror spectacle he directed them to, it was the anniversary of the adoption into this Teerhuis family that he said mistreated him. He said that the stepbrother sexually abused him. He said the mother had some kind of sexual tryst with him when he was 18. Again, everybody can make these kinds of claims, which I totally criticize, that his lawyer, without substantiating any of these claims, states them as facts at a trial. This killer denigrating the family that was good enough to take him into their own family as a foster child and then adopting him when he was 3. This is how he pays back this family that in his mind did him wrong. Ruin their name on the anniversary, making a point to let me know this was a huge part of it.
In the book Trophy Kill, the Shall We Dance Murder, do you have actual photocopies of his letters?
Yeah, I provide a couple photocopies of his handwritten letter to show, and of course I include the drawings. So.
Oh, great! Yeah, I always love to see that kind of stuff. Now, see, now you make up your mind. You say, okay, I got to go to the DA, the prosecutor. How do you do this? You call up? You just drive over there? What do you do?
I called them up and left a message. Of course, they're busy, so I left a message, and then the police called me back and said, "Hey, listen, what's this about?" This Detective Ross Reed, real nice guy, and I said, "Well, I got this information. I've been corresponding with the Sidney Teerhuis guy, and I'm pretty sure you're familiar with him, and I think I got some information that's evidence." He says, "Okay." So they met with me. I don't know if it was the same day or the next day. And then he told me right off the hop, he said, "Listen, have you photocopied this stuff?" I said, "No." He says, "Photocopy it." So I went and photocopied 200 pages of letters and, I think about 15 drawings, and did that. And then I had to hand them the originals.
All right.
And I handed them originals. They didn't have time to go through it. They have an interview with me, and then they do a video interview that later can be used at the trial if there's inconsistencies. So they deemed from the interview that there certainly was enough information to warrant the video interview, and then they conducted the video interview for about 90 minutes, and then they went from there. They contacted the Crown Attorney. Crown Attorney contacted me, and that's when I start sort of getting an idea of the ego involved. Again, we talk about narcissism sometimes, but the ego involved of the prosecutor as well. And the treatment of, say, again, I didn't tell about it, but I showed it in that, I'm somebody coming forward against somebody that, is a monstrous killer. This doesn't always happen, and yet there's sort of an indifference, and certainly, in the end, you could just make a conclusion that without the police officer helping me keep my sanity, it certainly wasn't the prosecutor. This trial was delayed for 5.5 years. And at one point when it was delayed, after it was on the verge of the trial, they said, "Oh, well, it's been delayed, and, we can't schedule it because this, the busiest, most prolific murder trial lawyer in the world, can't do it at this time." And they're challenging who is on the jury and its composition. So why don't you just get on with your life, Mr. Zupansky? I guess easier said than done.
Really? Do you think they would have had any kind of well, I guess, yeah, they probably... How much time did he get?
Well, what happened is that in Canada, of course, such a great place, we now have a different device, but it took the big, bad, old conservative government that got in for 10 years to enact this tough on crime, as they describe it, the Liberals. in that if you were to kill, like Robert Picton was convicted of 33, again it's complicated, but 33 victims on that farm, he still only has one murder conviction. Everything else was concurrent, which means it doesn't count. So when Sidney Teerhuis went to trial, he had the very, very good possibility of not being convicted of murder 1, premeditated, that wasn't even on the table, murder 2, or manslaughter. And there wasn't, unlike the U.S., there's no degrees of manslaughter, and in practical law, manslaughter was a 10-year sentence. Automatically in Canada, that means 6.5 years. Automatic good behavior credit is 6.5. You would be out without an early parole. But here's the thing that was even extra special for criminals. They were too dangerous to get parole, but their time in pretrial custody, which was delayed by their lawyer, was counting as double towards their inevitable sentence. So if you spent, like this guy, 5.5 years awaiting trial, that would count as 11 towards your 10-year typical manslaughter sentence. It would be time served.
Yeah, plus they'd owe him a year. He can go out and do another crime, right?
Sure.
So how much did he wind up getting?
Well, what happened is because of the evidence that I brought forward, the jury can make a recommendation as to how many years before he's eligible for parole. In Canada, they'll say, oh, what, my God, I'm outraged at the monstrous nature of these murders. But, you know, in 10 years, you have the possibility of getting parole. And if you really didn't screw up, you could probably get it. So the thing is, in this case, he had the possibility of parole within 10 years or to 25 years. And he was convicted of second-degree murder, thankfully, because otherwise he would have been out on the street. And the jury recommended that he not get parole for 25 years. So in essence, he got the maximum sentence in Canadian law, and hopefully, I think it has to be part of it, those letters, that evidence that was dominant at the trial, in terms of his lack of remorse, his behavior at trial, again, he's going to have a super uphill battle saying, oh, I didn't mean what I said, and I'm better now, I'll never be able to do it again. I don't have much confidence that the parole board will keep him in there forever, but hopefully, with that maximum sentence and the judge's comments that this person should be put apart from society for as long as humanly possible, that this may bear on the fact that he isn't entitled to parole after 25 years automatically, that he just may be in the company of the kinds of guys that he really admires, Paul Bernardo and Robert Picton and just a couple other people that will never see the light of day in Canada.
Yeah, but with the 25, you said this happened in 2003, right? So he's about halfway there.
He is.
Oh, wow. Hey, so now what was it like sitting there in the courtroom testifying? Was he giving you dirty looks and stuff?
No, actually he looked kind of smug. You know, he looked like he was really enjoying himself, but he didn't even look my way. He said a couple things. He called somebody the B word and swore a few times, and he had a big confrontation with the prosecutor over some other case before, and she really was very dominant herself. So it was an interesting dynamic at trial when he trotted out his nonsense with his lawyer, and then in cross-examination she just tore him a new one and really just shut him up and got him to admit that basically, yes, what he'd written in the book, or pardon me, in the letters, was that yes, he just was a piece of meat, a disposable piece of meat for this person to butcher and enjoy and then gloat over and revel in later.
Do you think he's done any crimes before this murder?
Absolutely. At first, I didn't understand the psychology. I really just came to true crime specifically and immersed myself in it when when I undertook the book project, when I decided to, which was 2004. I couldn't understand if you try to apply logic to these kinds of people, as you know, you can't. You better stop doing that and try to look at what other people similar to him, and they do share characteristics, what really is their mindset. There was no reason for this person to come forward at this time with this murder, except that he had Susan Sarandon's stolen gold necklace. The paparazzi were in Winnipeg, not for Sarandon, not for gear, but for Jennifer Lopez. At that time, she was the biggest thing on the planet. Ben Affleck was fooling around apparently with some dancers in Vancouver. She was headed to Winnipeg. It was a big deal. The paparazzi were waiting for something. So when this happened, they splashed that Jennifer Lopez's jewelry found in a pool of blood. They wanted to jump on that story. But like I say, I think Miramax said, let's just stop this right now, stem this, because if we let them, if we let them indulge themselves, they will tie a murder and motive to this thing. But it wasn't sexy. Two homosexual guys, the prosecutor, again, I disagree with this, depicting this guy as homeless. He lived on a reserve. He may have been alcoholic, but who is to say who is an alcoholic and who isn't? He was homosexual, again, so he may have stolen this jewelry. May have, probably. But again, it really wasn't a sexy story for the media, if you think about it. It's got stolen jewelry, but it's got all these other, and as you know, a lot of the stories that have the more disgusting elements to them, they don't really make the mainstream either.
Now, have you ever heard, after the book came out, have you ever heard from Susan Sarandon or Miramax or anybody?
No.
Not a peep?
No.
How has the book been received, like in the true crime community? Because these people can be pretty intense, the true crime fans.
Well, it's not written, again, I'm sometimes foolish, but I thought this book necessitates being written much differently than a typical true crime book. And, I don't know. As a journalist, I just have my own ideas on how things should be done. I certainly didn't want to. Some books are brilliant, but there's just no way that you're in the killer's mind. And lots of stuff. And Cold Blood's always held up as fantastic, but, he didn't take any notes. And those quotes are disputed. So I didn't want to have me recreating anything. And I couldn't get anything whatsoever. Zero cooperation, no notice of even the person's funeral. Nothing at all about the victim. Nothing. I tried, I couldn't get anything. I had a contact with the cousin, nothing. I thought I went through the proper channels to try to be sensitive, try to approach them at trial. But what are they going to say? Why should they talk to me anyway? And so there was a lot of things that I had to lay out this book a certain way. When some people responded to it, I think I adhered to the point where I'm going to show you and not tell you. And in that, some people believe what defense lawyers say sometimes and what self-serving killers say self-servingly. So I think some people, again, not having any relation to the crime because it's Winnipeg, it is a story about the difference in the Canadian judicial system, but more so I thought it was, let's look into the mind of this killer and realize this is really how these people think. Other people have an appeal they have to think about, even though if they're on death row, or they have to consider their family, some member of their family, they just don't want to say that in court. Or they're in a prison system where maybe being a child killer or being a rapist is not in their best interest. This guy, again, had no qualms. He had no forethought of repercussions. So it is a unique example of the truth. And it was backed up, again, point by point at trial to say, this is true, that is true. When he says he blew up the lungs like Kleenex, or the tissue was like this as he cut through the bone, or he squeezed the heart and the blood dripped all over him, the pathologist at the trial had to go through that detail by detail to incredibly prove that he did what he said he did.
Dan, we're down to the last couple of minutes. Off the air, you were saying that you're working on another book coming up. You want to give us a little preview on that?
Sure. This is I'm back for a certain amount of time back in where I grew up in Thunder Bay, Ontario, a small place of 100,000 people. And there's a case that probably sparked my interest in all things legal. When I was 24, a young boy that was killed when he was 17, and there was rumors, because there was suppression in the news about details of incredible mutilation, and he disappeared for a month and wound up found on Halloween. Again, incredible mutilation, and the story just was in the media that because he sold a few ounces of weed, he was killed by some monstrous force of gangs or something because he owed money, or he was a pot dealer. So I knew it sounded wrong, and I didn't know why, but it just sounded absurd. It sounded like, and this case has gone cold for 32 years. I come back, everybody knows who the murderer is, and the murderer just went to prison for the same kinds of crimes: forcible confinement, sexual assault, stupefying drugs, and 14 years of rape. So it's a cold case where everybody knows the killer. The entire community has known for years, and it's what happened, what went wrong, why could they not convict this guy? And it has all kinds of connections to Hell's Angels and Satan's Choice and all kinds of things that are intriguing, but in the end, it's still, again, always a psychopathic killer.
Oh, boy. As soon as that one's out, man, give me a call. Okay, we'll bring you right back on. Dan Zupansky, thank you so much. How can people find you, get a hold of you, listen to your show?
Just find out, Google True Murder, and you will find all kinds of sites that carry True Murder every week, and you can get into the archives of about 264 60 to 90-minute programs with all kinds of fascinating authors talking about their incredible true crime books.
Dan Zupansky, Trophy Kill, The Shall We Dance Murder, and his blog is called, his podcast is called True Murder. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ed. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm a new fan of the program, the Opperman Report. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, brother. Bye. Okay, Dan Zupansky, incredible stuff, man. Incredible stuff. This whole thing with this Teerhuis story. I just want to give everybody a little heads up, because today is 5/19/2016, and me and Vic were trying to get to California in June 4th, and spend about a week, 2 weeks up there filming. I want to film with Hank Harrison, and I want to film over at the Bernie rallies, and hopefully maybe with Peter Del Scott, I'm hoping as well. I got to get something up to him. It's GoFundMe/Opperman Report, and that's how you can help us fund this trip. Okay, we need to buy a couple of cameras, a couple of video equipment, but anything to send, even $10-$20, will help us with the gas and the lodging. I got to rent the car. My car can't make it all the way up there and back. So, and then we can get some. This will be our first video productions. We'll get out there for you. That will be available on Amazon. But if you donate in advance, we'll send you a free copy of the video. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I'll see you right on that.